Welcome back to another episode of Framebreakers. Today we have an energetic conversation with Ben Pollack, the head of marketing at a Series B startup called Parabola. Ben is also a go-to-market expert in residence at First Round Capital, one of the top early-stage venture funds. This conversation was great. Ben has so much energy and a bunch of startup experience to match. Before he went to Parabola, he actually was at another pretty successful startup. So we talked a lot about what his framework was when he was looking for a new job. It's really helpful if you're thinking about a new role yourself. We also talked about how he structured the first 90 days in his new job. He spent a lot of time learning what the customers cared about, also figuring out what their current best channels were for marketing. We also talked about Ben's approach to retention marketing and how they focus on their lower tier customers. They really spend a lot of time on the personas and motivations for those buyers, and also how he interacts with the customer experience team to make sure that they're getting the marketing message out there. So if you're thinking about retention marketing or trying to keep your existing customers or upsell them, that's a great segment for you. And then we do an awesome full breakdown of what's been working on their LinkedIn ads. This is like a great masterclass playbook on how you should think about running LinkedIn ads. We even went live into their current ads that they're running to talk about what type of creative is working best. And we got really specific. So there's some really tactical things in there. And as always, if you get just a little bit of value from this, the best thing you do is pay it forward by sharing with a friend that you think might get some value as well. And if you enjoy these candid conversations with some of the best marketing leaders with some of the best companies, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. All right, on to the pod. Back to another episode. Today, I'm joined by Ben Pollack. He is the head of marketing at Parabola, a 35-person Series B company backed by OpenView, Thrive Capital, Matrix Partners. He's also the go-to-market expert in residence at First Round Capital, a very successful early-stage fund based in New York and Philadelphia. And before that, he was the head of growth marketing at a company called ChartHop that is about 80 people, a Series B backed by Andreessen Horowitz, Cowboy Ventures, co-found partners, which talk my book a little bit. I'm an LP of and know the founder of well. And another thing about Ben is that he's sneaky tall. I just realized this, but you're 6'7"?
Yeah. How did you know that? How did that information get to you?
Well, I remember that you played basketball at Amherst. So right before this, I Googled Ben Pollack, Amherst basketball, and your stat profile came up, and I was like, holy crap, he's 6'7".
I'm sneaky tall. Did you also see my whopping 3 points, 4 boards a game? Because I don't know why that's not impressing you. Come on.
I mean, listen, I played soccer in college myself, but I didn't get much burn, and so your stats are much more impressive than mine.
Yeah, I am sneaky tall. Sometimes before I meet people in person for the first time, I try to let them know, by the way, I might scare you a little bit. I'm a very tall dude, but yeah, that's a fun fact about me for sure.
What So is 6'7" tall enough to be pretty uncomfortable in coach on planes?
Yeah, 6'7" stinks. I tell folks all the time there's a normal curve for where you want to be height wise, at least potentially as a male. 6'2", 6'3" is awesome. 6'7", brutal. You can't fit on planes. Your pants don't fit. Just only struggles for us 6'7" plus folks. So it's no bueno at this stage in life.
Man, well, we'll keep the big and tall folks in our thoughts. But what I'm definitely interested to learn more about kind of your marketing journey and share, because you've worked at some really cool startups and been exposed to a lot of early stage startups, especially with First Round. So to get more of a context about you, are there any particular people or particular roles that you've had that have had an outsized impact on your career?
Yeah, this is super fluffy, but every role that I've had, whether it was a huge success or a failure, has had a part in my journey. And I think it's really hard sometimes, when you're in it, to understand that this is part of your journey, but it's true. Sometimes you got to learn what you don't like or learn what you're not good at to figure out what you do like or where you do succeed. And I've definitely been through some of those trials and tribulations. The first really impactful role for me was at a company called Reonomy. And so I joined as the 30th employee at a Series B prop tech company. And that was the first really, really impactful mentor in my life. This guy, Sam Viskovich, who taught me a lot of marketing from the ground up. What is a channel? How do you activate it? What is positioning? How does positioning bleed into channel activation? How do you measure that progress or that tactic? So Sam has stayed a close friend and a mentor through my life. And then at ChartHop, I had the opportunity to work for an amazing product marketer, Diana Kusser, who came from HireVue, LinkedIn, some other orgs. I used to throw shade on the product marketing function as a growth marketer. And boy, did she absolutely flip my understanding of that. All these tactics, all these channels that you're trying to deploy at scale, it's only as good as your centralized messaging is. That doesn't resonate with the customer, all of your tactics will be lackluster and not hit the mark. And so that was a really, really amazing experience for me. She also taught me some really great stuff about being a manager, about slowing down to speed up. Some things that I think, again, I at one point in my career was like, no, I'm going to move fast. And, that's not always the case. And then the first round experience has been great for me. I've been working with them for almost 2 years. Emery Rosansky over there is the VP of go-to-market. So she runs like their platform portfolio team. And I think what she'd really taught me is when you have ideas around a go-to-market or like a strategy, it's only an idea and you actually need to like put that into a framework. And then that framework is what's repeatable across different orgs. And so working with first round companies, it's really been a forcing function for me to like put pen to paper on some of the things that I think I believe in and know, and ultimately present them as like a framework of how you try to accomplish X, Y, or Z in your motion. So really, really fortunate to have just great experiences and some not great ones and great mentors and peers throughout my time.
Yeah. So I think it's good too. Like, it sounds like, right, it's well-rounded mentorship that you've had at like different companies. So you joined Parabola a little while ago. As you were going through that job search, now that you like, we all kind of go through this. I think early in your career, you're just like oftentimes like happy to get a job at what seems like a reputable company. But as you get more confident in your skills and ability, I think you become much more demanding in what you want in that next role. And if you think about it, it's much more clear about like the things you're looking for. So what were those check boxes that you were looking for in Parabola, and like what made the most sense when you were taking this role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do totally feel like each role that I've taken, it's gone from like, feel really, I'm always super psyched and feel so fortunate to join an org, but you do get to be more choosy. And you also develop an idea of what you're looking for, what you want, what you don't want. I wanted to lead a marketing org or a growth org first and foremost. I really wanted that at bat and opportunity. So at ChartHop, I reported to Diana, our CMO, but I was leading the growth org. So at its peak, had 4 or 5 folks under me. And I wanted the opportunity to lead the marketing team. And so what that probably meant was an earlier stage Series A company. But there was a few other key things that I looked for. First and foremost, this is a common answer, but it's so true. You need to really, really get along and like the people that you're going to be working with. And you need to feel like you're going to be challenged by them. And hopefully they can be challenged by you a little bit too. And so I'd spent months with the Parabola team, just getting a coffee, talking through strategy, and like kind of courting each other in a really natural way. As the chatter became more serious, all I wanted to know was like, why do customers love you? Like what? Show me why your retention is strong. Send me customer calls. So I listened to like 15 or 20 gong calls of prospects and customers. I read some like third-party diligence docs in the business. Did everything that I could to like understand, see, and feel the customer love the product. And I think that really, really strong gravity for our customers towards what we were doing is ultimately what helped push me over the edge and take the job.
I think there's some awesome things to uncover there. And I remember hearing one of the early sales hires at Retool talk about the same thing, about like wanting to figure out why customers love Retool, why they're going to renew. And it sounds like you kind of went through that same thing. When you were talking with, I guess, who you were interviewing for, or like who was your main point of contact when you were interviewing?
Alex Justine, our CEO, founder.
So was there, I'm guessing you probably hadn't asked for this type of information in interview processes before. And so I'm curious, like, were you nervous about that? Was he hesitant to give that information to you? Like, how'd those conversations go?
It's such a good question. It's a 2-part answer. 1, you have to know what to ask for. And 2, you have to not be scared to ask for it. It's a really important decision. So as much as he was comfortable, I wanted to understand the financials of the business. But I actually, and that was like up to him on how much he was willing to share. For me, I would not have taken this job had I not been given transparency into like the customer calls. Like send me the gongs, right? Like I really want to see and feel that. And so it was all stuff that I'd ask for. It was extremely natural. It was at a point in the cycle where it was appropriate, right? Like we had developed enough trust and rapport where it felt in my core like it was the right ask. I think like to do it on the first time that we ever met and be like, send me all of the customer details, all the financial business. It would have probably been a bit of an ask. So I think it's just like understanding your gut instinct, the relationship with the interviewer, but also like being scared to vouch for yourself, get the information you need to make an informed decision about your next move.
Yeah, you don't have to go upstairs in the first date, right? You make sure you spend some time building that relationship first and trust, because it takes some vulnerability on both sides to get to that point. But I think that's like that for anyone, and I think like realistically, you're not going to get access to that information earlier on in your career. But right, I think most of the people that might be listening to this are further along, and it's something that they should be thinking about when they're interviewing for that next role.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, I just hired an awesome growth marketer, and she's a few years more junior, and she asked a lot of those questions, and that was great signal that she was a good fit, right? And I think it's similar for myself with Alex, our CEO. The fact that I was diligencing them so hard, he was like, no, this actually makes me trust you. Like you're really putting in the work to understand and make sure it's the right choice on both sides. So like it's ultimately a really good thing. And I do think as you grow in your career, you earn the right to ask some of those questions. Right. Like I think as an example, like out of college, BDR taking their first job to dig into that extent, like that might feel a little weird. You should still totally feel free to like ask some of those questions. But again, I think it's just a situational thing.
Yeah. What quirks do you have as a marketing leader?
I read this question beforehand and I really had to think hard. So I asked a couple of my direct reports. So I'll read you some of their quotes. Very enthusiastic. Okay, check that one off. I agree. Really honest, radically candid, a little vulnerable, and sometimes unhinged.
Sometimes unhinged.
Yeah. I'm very, I think like earlier in my career, I tried to be something I wasn't. And like, I'm a like a casual, fun, human, vulnerable guy. Again, in a workplace, like there's ways that fits in. Like there's obviously things to think about, but yeah, I try to be really honest and natural with my team, and I think that's something that they ultimately appreciate. One other quirk that I have is I run really fast in my brain, and so some of my peers always get annoyed with me because when we're about to sign off on a call, I have one more idea for them that I wanted to chat through quickly, and that extends into 30 more minutes. So I'd say those are a few quirks.
Is there, in terms of like your enthusiasm or being unhinged, right? Like are there any examples of where you thought you may have gone like you were too excited about something and it bit you in the ass?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. If you share equal excitement about every single thing that you're doing, your team might interpret that as equal levels of prioritization. And so I think it's always important to like couple levels of excitement with like, for the record, this should be an hour project, right? And so that's all been learnings as I've like gone from an IC to growing teams. Similarly, that's my tone, but that might not be the best tone for other folks to receive feedback in or have conversations in. And so sometimes you got to read the room. And I think that there's been times where I tried to bring the fire and my direct report or my peer just wasn't feeling it because they didn't sleep great or whatever the reason was. And sometimes you got to read the room and just try to understand, meet folks where they're at.
Yeah. I think that it's critical. And it's hard too when you can get really excited about something, or like for me, the downfall there for me sometimes is like, I very much believe in fast feedback. If you have feedback from me, like give it to me right away, be brutal. Like I want the raw stuff so I can internalize and get better, or just disagree vehemently with you. But not everyone is like that. And that's bitten me in the ass before, because I'm just like, my brain's like, oh no, like you should want this right away and you should want it in like the most raw form possible. And that is not always the case.
For sure. I mean, the core of both of those like frameworks is like while you should be your authentic self, absolutely, you also have to be aware of your surroundings, be aware of your environment, and try to meet folks where they're at and find a happy medium. And that's
Ultimately, their perception is their reality, and that's really all that matters. All right, so you worked with, for first round, only invest in early stage companies. You've worked at some earlier stage companies. What's one of the scrappiest things you've done in your marketing career?
That is a great question. I'll give you two answers. One answer is kind of centered around early stage growth. Generally, a lot of the first round companies I work with talk about this, and it's like, they're just raised a seed, they have 7 employees, they have 15 employees, they want to grow. Like, how do you get there? How do you grow pipeline? How do you stand up a marketing function? How do you even think about that? It's like daunting. It's one brick, one day at a time. And I'm working with a really cool founder on a project right now, and he's trying to refactor his business and grow marketing from the ground up. It's like, cool, how do I start going to market and getting pipeline? It's like, ask your investors for referrals, scrape all of their LinkedIn, scrape all of your peers' LinkedIn, send them copy that then they can then send to those folks. All of a sudden, you've deployed 200 messages, you get 100 responses, you get 50 meetings out of that. Folks think about like this huge go-to-market strategy from such a existential lens, and sometimes it's just like, look at what's right in front of you and go and execute on that. And early stage, like, you need really strong positioning, a really strong value prop that makes sense, so that when that end user receives that, they're like, oh, I get why they're making this intro. But like, just leveraging networks is like a huge, scrappy, always on piece. That then is coupled on like, cool, once you find some success, test other channels, test thought leadership, test organic content, maybe touch paid, maybe touch field, maybe touch something else, see what works, get signal, hire someone, fill that gap. Cool, now you have a marketer who's like trying to test these channels, and as a founder, you can build like a little bit of arm's length there, so you can still grow the business without you having to be the marketer. And so that is a super scrappy process. It really is. But like, that is what early stage software go-to-market looks like a lot of the time. And again, like, there's scientific ways to think about go-to-market, but also it's just like, if that's your ICP and these are the people that know them, like, reach out and start there. And so I think that's a scrappy but tried and true tactic that always works. I think another like interesting scrappy playbook that I'd executed on was, and I would do it differently this time. A previous business I was at, not to be named, we tested paid search. And before you know it, we were ROI positive on paid search. And as we ramped spend more and more every month, we were continuously ROI positive on paid search. We got to a point where we were spending $250,000 a month on paid search, just crushing top of funnel lead gen. 100% inbound focused business. 80% of inbound was through paid search. Those campaigns were highly profitable for the net new business. But the clients that were driven from the paid search campaigns did not renew. In fact, the NRR on that cohort was below 100%. So the business was losing money on them at time. And because we were spending time investing in paid channels, we were taking away time and resource from investing in brand or other elements of go-to-market. If I were to do that differently, you have to like lever up paid and other types of like meeting tomorrow, meeting next week type channels, but you have to also keep the long-term in mind. And I think that was a key learning for me there. And in being scrappy and chasing after that next meal, I actually sacrificed my overall gut health, right? And I think that was just a learning from that scrappy moment.
That's really fascinating. So now, does that change how early you try to implement, looking at either like super high intent pipeline or those churn rates based on the channels those customers came through?
Oh, it changes everything about my understanding and emphasis on paid, as an example. I mean, first and foremost, like, if you only focus on new business acquisition, like, you're going to end up having an issue where if those clients aren't healthy for you in the long term, like, sometimes you do need to build or to rejig something to like get some customers because you need some traction, but ultimately you've got to listen to your gut and like take that signal. As an example of how this changed my direction here at Parabola, we invest in paid, but it's tempered and we get good lead gen from it. And I think in a prior world, I would have been like, whoa, there's lead gen here. It's turning into pipeline. Let's floor it. Maybe we floor it a little bit more in time, but what if we focus that time and energy on other brand building moments, on other types of campaigns that would actually compound in growth over time? versus something that's like input equals output from a paid perspective. So paid has a place in most of like B2B SaaS, but I caution folks to rely on it as their sole silver bullet lever, because it should never really be that for any business, in my opinion.
So you mentioned one thing there is like, don't lever up too much on it. And it could affect things down the road, or like, I think you mentioned something specifically around like, hey, you don't have to focus all your efforts just on the net new. Do you guys do anything in terms of retention marketing?
Oh yeah, we do a ton. The biggest piece of retention marketing that we do is that Parabola is an interesting business. We have dozens of what we would call advanced customers that are like multi-$1,000 ACV deals with multiple users. And then we have hundreds of long tail, what we would call like individual users plus customers paying us anywhere from like a few $100 a year to like $1,000 a year. We're kicking up a larger motion to market to them more actively. We actually just like held our first product release webinar. Come see what's new and learn how you can leverage it. And we're starting to build more like in-app templates and guides. We're investing in our launch team and our CX team to like drive growth within those accounts. So for us, the expansion motion is very real. All of our biggest accounts came in here and are now here. A lot of that growth over time has been CS and our solutions and launch team, like in the weeds battling. And as the marketing org grows, I hope to take some of the pressure off of them and find other more natural ways to engage folks throughout that org.
Yeah, I think it's funny. You don't hear a lot of marketing orgs talk about this stuff, but it does seem like a really obvious play is to find ways to like spend more time on retention marketing or like upselling, because you can drive a lot of traction that way.
Yeah, and it depends on the business. It depends on like, what is the upsell lever for you? Like, do you have other SKUs? Do you have other product lines? Is it just a user-based thing? Are they paying a platform fee and there's no real route to upsell? Like the pricing and the packaging has a lot to do with us. For us as a seat-based business, it's like in a tool that's like relatively applicable to a bunch of different teams in an org, it makes a lot of sense for us to like get an initial group of users who are finding value and getting a use case fulfilled. And now they feel that pain point or that job to be done. It's been handled, and naturally, hopefully they start to go to other folks in the org and like Sherpa us in. But what we're also trying to build are natural like sharing mechanisms so that builder can like actually turn a Parabola flow, which is like a no-code data automation tool, into a report that rolls up, and then they can share that report with their boss or their colleague on another team. So like we got a lot of feedback that like they just want to share this data, and so we're trying to build natural avenues for them to do that as well.
Yeah, to build almost like what would amount to virality, but just inside that org, right? And like build some of that stickiness.
Yeah, for sure. And for what it's worth, like people talk about PLG and virality all the time. I want to level set for anyone listening. It's really hard. It's really hard to do, to incentivize user behavior in the appropriate way. It takes a long time. But it's also like it can be a step change for your business, right? Where all of a sudden one new user will generate 0.2 more new users, whether that's in the same org or a different org. And so that's a North Star for us, but we're also like tempering our expectations on how quickly we can truly like catalyze that flywheel. That makes sense. Yeah.
On that retention marketing side, what do you think that you guys are doing that has been the most successful retention marketing program?
Mapping how different orgs receive value, like the use cases that different orgs in a specific business can fulfill with Parabola, and trying to map the value associated with that. The V1 of that has been our amazing CSMs going to different teams and being like, hey, you're with this team, a similar company, we work with that team over there, they use us for this. We hired a great product marketer a couple months ago, and part of her work stream right now is like building out what we would call a commercial playbook, dissecting how different personas within different orgs get value. And then all of a sudden you have this amazing positioning base that you can deploy ads or a webinar or an email or just a talk track from a CSM. So I think really like the key there is like building that central base of understanding, and then you can deploy programs off of it.
Yeah, right. Like using marketing as the guide to get feedback from customers so that you can then use that information later on. It makes total sense.
Yeah, just even in like a simple way. And like, we're also doing the life cycle stuff, automated emails, through intercom, all that, trying to cover our bases. But I think a lot of an easy way to get some customer marketing going is to have a dinner. And then the first question you should ask is like, what should we talk about? Something? Should we have some type of theme? Probably. Next question is, what do these folks care about? Well, what are their pain points? What are their jobs to be done? What are they reading? So it's all centers back to like that understanding and that foundation, for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you've been at Parabola for a little while now. What was your own 30, 60, 90 when joining? Like, I guess the real question is like, why did they hire you? Right? Why did they think you were the right fit? And then what was your focus in those first few months?
Yeah. I'd actually built, Parabola was like hiring for a head of growth, head of marketing, and I helped them with the search and built what I thought would be an impactful 30, 60, 90 for their hire. And then Alex was like, actually, this is pretty good. Can we talk more about this? And so that was my start here at Parabola was unique because after I joined, we raised, and that meant a strong push to go to market with that Series B led by OpenView. Blake Bartlett and the team over there have been great. Really, really helpful for us. Totally recommend anyone who's chatting with OpenView. They're great folks. So my first 30 days were a sprint to a go-to-market for a fundraise. And then the next 60 after that was, for me, basically 3 buckets. One, understanding customers. And guess what? That motion is still always on. Still not where it needs to be. It's always growing. As a marketer, I'm really trying to challenge myself to get deeper and deeper every day on understanding our customers and how our product fits in. 2 was, as that starts to move, can we start testing and activating some channels? So like truly, there are a finite number of channels that you can reach your customers through. Which ones of those do we think are lowest hanging fruit or going to be most impactful? And what can we do that's like low risk, high reward to just start testing? Case studies, some content, some SEO, some paid ads, some thought leadership. So just like getting that moving and seeing what sticks. And that felt weird and uncomfortable because you're like kind of trying stuff without really knowing like what's going to totally hit. And then 3rd month was like, once I had a little bit of a sense of like who our customers were and what channels were starting to work, hiring. And so product marketing, growth marketing, and I already had a content design person in-house. And so once I started to understand the shape and the mold of like what this person might be doing, given my understanding of the context of the business, start to hire. And so 3 months in, for me, it was like pretty good understanding of the TAM, the customers, the use cases. Again, that's still growing. Activating our channels, building systems architecture to start to like track them, like an attribution program through HubSpot. Like we bought HubSpot, bought Clearbit, hooked up all the tech, the good stuff there. And then bringing in a team that can execute with you, because as one person, you can only do so much. And that, I think, probably summarizes it.
Yeah, I guess awesome. And you broke it down pretty well. Let me ask you on the ad side, right? So I'm on your guys' LinkedIn company page and looking at some of the ads. What are you finding that's working well for you guys on the LinkedIn ads front?
Oh man, that's such a good question. So Parabola sells into a bunch of different industries. We are a horizontally applicable product, and we're trying to understand our focus. Most of our customers exist within retail, like direct to consumer, CPG, retail brands, and then like freight and logistics companies. 2 of our biggest customers on the freight and logistics sides are Uber Freight and Flexport. Really great logos. We have a couple ads that like reference them in some way, shape, or form. Crushes. Just like, I want to be like that company. That brand name is attractive to me. And, what's disappointing to me as a marketer is that we do so much research to understand use case and build that as a visualization and reference the use case. They want to be like that. Right. So sometimes simple is better. So that's been really successful. What you'll also see there is that there's a ton of them. There's a lot. And
I'm glad you brought this up because I think like it keeps refreshing my scroll to go down further, which I love because like you're about to tell me probably, but I believe more people need to be testing more creative. But yes, go on. I interrupted your point.
So in the world of hiring, I don't just mean in-house, I mean agencies. Early stage marketers can get so much leverage out of the right agency less risk, build proof of concept, and if it makes sense, hire behind that role. So I actually brought on a paid demand gen agency to help me run faster, and their prescription was, we're going to test a lot in a bunch of different audiences in a bunch of different formats, and we'll start to understand what sticks. Now I have a much more pointed POV, and I brought in a great growth marketer. So if you were to look at this in 3 or 4 weeks, it'd actually be much tighter because we've now understood what works. But you have to test at high velocity, and you can't just test willy-nilly. There's hypotheses that back most of those, I promise, even if it's like we think the button on the right is going to be more impactful. But yeah, it's mostly just a testing framework and trying to understand what works and doing that across multiple different industries, personas, ad types, etc.
And tell me if this is right on the creative side. So I've been looking at this more intently recently, and I've been seeing a lot of LinkedIn advertising their own ad platform. I've been screenshotting every one I see and taking some mental notes. I'll probably make like a post on this at some point because, right, theoretically, LinkedIn should have the most data about what's effective at advertising on LinkedIn. And what I've noticed is basically all static images that they don't feature any person, but it's usually big text, high contrast, and with the background. And then there's usually like one section that's highlighted, the text highlighted because it's a different color, or like a number's highlighted. And looks like you guys have a pretty similar formula for most of your creative. Have you found that's been working well?
100%. We call them bold text ads. Like, how do I say this delicately? We have an amazingly beautiful platform. It's a canvas. It's no code. You drag in flows. You build a visualization on it. And again, I was so disappointed when like some of those ads just perform worse than like bold text in your face, very catchy, very strong. And so we're testing all of that. But yeah, bold text ads crush it for sure.
Bold text ads. And how many creatives are you guys actually running right now? Because it's like I still haven't gotten to the bottom of the scroll.
There's probably 50 creatives live right now, 50 to 75. But that's also like probably too much. That also represents lack of focus a little bit. But it's also necessary sometimes to try a lot to get that focus. And I wouldn't change a thing we did. We tested a ton in a 3-month period. We learned a lot. We got some lead gen along the way. And now it's time to refine. Great. And I think that's a very natural motion as long as you can't like test at crazy velocity scale forever. I mean, in theory you could if you had a fully staffed creative and performance team, which we don't. So we're actually shifting off of the agency, bringing demand gen paid back in-house with our growth marketer, using our designer to empower our growth marketer with like Canva-based designs so that she can actually create her own ads at scale, and then just shrink down the scope based on what's worked and start to rebuild from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are you guys, is most of the traffic you're targeting on LinkedIn, are they retargeting from search somewhere else, or is it cold and then retargeting all within the LinkedIn ecosystem?
More so the latter. There's some like website and like, someone searches Parabola, it's our site, doesn't convert, they're going to get remarketed and pushed into LinkedIn and Instagram campaigns. The power of LinkedIn is the targeting, right? Like I actually really don't love running remarketing ads on LinkedIn because it's really expensive to buy inventory on LinkedIn. It's less expensive to buy inventory on Facebook or Instagram. You can't target firmographically. Like, find me all retail companies between 100 and 1,000 employees where your job title equals, right? Like, you can't do that on Facebook. You can't do it on LinkedIn. We do run these really powerful, like, mini funnels on LinkedIn. So here's, like, an example of how one of those would work. We have a few top-of-funnel assets that are deployed to an ICP-aligned but cold audience. But, like, really ICP-aligned. Like, 35,000 people. Like, really as tight as we can. And if you're familiar with the LinkedIn backend of LinkedIn ads platform, you'll know that's quite specific. Serve them. We have like a hype video running to them that we created as part of like a new product launch. We have a couple ebooks that we created on like how to do this use case type ebook and some other case studies that are downloadable. Anyone who engages with that ad at all, even if they don't download it, pushing them into a remarketing campaign, and then they're getting served those bold text ads. That's like stop doing this the wrong way. Do it this way. And like, if you were served that from a cold perspective, you'd be like, I don't even know who you are. Are you telling me this, right? And then you build a little bit of trust, and all of a sudden, like, that conversion rate should uptick.
Yeah. I guess that's the big takeaway too, that people need to realize, like, especially in B2B advertising, your awareness stuff is all about just like explaining very simply who you are and what is it that you do, and get them to start to trust you, right? And then then it's just like you start building trust with the social proof, like using your big logos, right? And then you can start making some more bold claims, and that's like generally how that funnel should work. But I think sometimes people try to hit them with like the trust building stuff before people even know who they are.
Yeah. B2B marketers, like any human being, sometimes crave immediacy. And it's really hard to take longer term bets and sacrifice short term gains. I'm doing that a little bit right now. Like, we could floor it on paid, we'd probably see more leads. But I'm actively saying, like, no, we should invest our time in building other foundations so that when we do want to floor it at another point in time, it's that much cleaner, it's that much clearer. So it's definitely a bit of a dance for sure.
Yeah. All right. Tell me, what are the OKRs or like metrics that you're most focused on right now?
Yeah. Standard stuff, qualified, pipeline generated, close rates from that pipeline. But there's so many slices on that. What verticals, what use cases, what channels, right? And so those are our North Stars, but there's so many ways you can dissect that to be like, to actually drive it forward. And I think all of those variables that I mentioned are really important for us in that analysis. So like those are the North Stars, but there's a ton of proxy metrics that are built around that to structure.
All right, let me ask this a bit different way too. What's like the most important thing that you're personally working on right now in the business?
Driving I'd say two things. One is driving a body of positioning work that our product marketer is leading, but that our entire company is focused. We had an amazing offsite in SF. We brought in investors and customers, and everyone was asked, like, how do you explain Parabola to a peer? And no one could do it in a clean, standardized way. It didn't feel great. And so how do you explain Parabola in one sentence? How do you explain it to that persona or that persona? How would you explain it in a minute? How would you explain it from a jobs to be done perspective? How would you relate that to value? Parabola has great customers, amazing retention, but had never really gone through that mapping process. And so we're sprinting through that right now. Second piece we're focused on is using that as an amazing foundation to plan going into Q1. Like, really using the end of year here. Like, of course, we're trying to close business. Our sales team's getting scrappy. That doesn't stop. But on the marketing side, like, instead of trying to get a quick win through a holiday campaign at the end of December, be more thoughtful. Take a little bit more of a longer term bet. We are running something that'll be a little quippy and fun, but like, that's not the main emphasis right now for our business. It's more like structuring ourselves to scale.
How did you, when you first joined Parabola, how did you explain it to people? What was, like, if you can remember right back then, how you were explaining Parabola to people? What was it like?
I leaned on the word no code a lot more as a marketer. Like, no code to me was like sexy and cool. And I realize even now, like, I explained it to you here, in a data automation tool. That means so many different things. And so what we're really trying to do is like be so literal. And it's really hard. And so what we don't want to be a no code AI tool, right? Like, we do have no code. We do have AI in our product, but we're trying to be really specific and pragmatic so that an end user can be like, oh, I totally get that, versus like data automation. I think our engineering team works on that. Right? It's just way too broad. And yeah, we're still trying to figure it out.
And what's the simplest way you can explain it today, you think? Even though, sorry, I know that like this isn't going to be the end thing, but where do you think right now on the spot, like, how would you explain the simplest way possible?
Sure. Parabola is a tool that allows non-technical and technical folks to perform complex data processes and analyses without the use of code. Again, I kind of lean back on the no code piece there. The way I would best explain it is, actually through examples. And this is now actually like why I think it's so important to bring it one level deeper. So you can almost think of like a product marketing canvas or a map. You have one sentence that unites, right? Like everyone, but then what does it mean for this vertical? And what does it mean for this persona within that vertical? So for a company like Flexport, it's our biggest customer. They help brands ship goods around the world, tens of thousands of packages a day. The data processes that are associated with that are insane. Flexport has a huge emphasis right now on trying to serve customers in an efficient way. Typically, like to handle a lot of those processes, like getting the data from that vendor and matching it to the package slip from the third-party logistics provider, it's an extremely chaotic, labor-intensive process. And so we're helping them be the glue for a lot of those processes, where an operator who's not technical but understands all the moving pieces can actually build a workflow, literally bring in data from NetSuite, match that to our invoices, find the discrepancies, notify the carrier when the discrepancy is true and ask them to refund us. Set it live. That flow historically was done once a day by 3 employees downloading an Excel file with missing data. Now it's on. Their time is saved. They're recouping more money from it, right? And so that's what we're trying to do, is take this really high level abstract idea, make it clean and applicable to all the different use cases and segments we have, but also like really build that like concrete and smooth path for that customer prospect.
Yeah. And I think you're bringing up this larger point of why positioning can be so complex, especially if your ICP can be varied, right? You have at the very top of that pyramid, you have something that explains what Parabola does in like the most simple way possible that the most number of people understand. But then when you're talking to a different industry or a different leader in that industry, right, you need to explain it one way. But you, again, like if we're talking like website copy, you have 5 seconds to do that, or like 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, great. Like how do you do it then? And then once you get beyond that and they're interested in a bit more, how do you explain it in like the mid-level detail? And then down the funnel, how do you like really explain it in like the most detailed version? And I think, right, there's so many iterations so fast.
100%. You nailed it. It's like, do you speak to the buyer? Do you speak to the end user? Do you speak to this segment? Do you speak to this persona? And the truth is, you build out different landing pages for all of them. You distribute them really tactfully, and ultimately you need a homepage that works for everyone. And those are all hard to do, and they're even harder to make them lockstep. But if you have a really clean foundation that maps all of that, it's like, cool, check and then when a new BDR joins and they want to write a sequence, or a growth marketer joins and they want to write an ad, all back to that centralized information versus like having positioning floating in 5 different people's heads of the orgs. And I'll guarantee you, wherever we land, it's not going to be right. It'll be different in 6 months, 100%. But then at least you're all marching to the same beat of the same drum, the beat of the same drum, same beat. And then you can iterate together, but you're not going to be lockstep unless you're like agreeing on that source of truth. It's the same as like agreeing on a shared set of KPIs. Like you have to agree on a shared set of like go-to-market parameters. Who do you engage with? How do you speak to them? What value do you provide to them? And then all of a sudden your funnel is much more cohesive and clean versus like it being totally sporadic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck with the rest of that project. I'm excited to see how it turns out, because it's like the concept is simple, but executing on it can be very complex.
Yeah, and the executing on it is the hard part. And it's a ton of research, codifying that research, codifying customer use case and value that they get from it, aggregating all that data, having workshops off of it, bringing in a couple third parties to validate it. It's a beast. And I think that's something that a lot of non-marketers probably don't fully understand. It's a huge project, and we're trying to condense it into about 6 to 8 weeks here, but I think we're doing a great job.
No problem. Easy day. Do you have any kind of marketing ideas or experiments that you want to run that you haven't had a chance to run yet?
Yeah. I've never really cracked a programmatic or user generated SEO program. Done really great SEO, but it's always through like keyword research and writing great content and having smart linking strategies and having strong pillar hub and spoke models. And like, I feel really good about my ability to tackle it that way. I've never cracked something like at scale programmatic, or like having users generate content that then is scraped and crawled by Google, and then having that ultimately rank and having that be an engine, like the G2 model. Not our business at all, obviously, but it's one of the really clear ones where users generate reviews rank because there's stuff with keywords, and then G2's ranking further, and then it'll generate more reviews. And, that can be like game changing for a business if you can figure out one of those loops, but it's really hard to execute on and execute well. That said, one of our themes is like take fewer bets, but take bigger bets as we plan into next year. Don't try to do everything kind of well. Do 3 or 4 things really freaking well. And so we're thinking about potentially clever ways to test that out next year.
All right. Very cool. Yeah, I think you're right. Like if you can figure out one of those loops, it can be super powerful, but it's hard to kind of retrofit that to every business, right? The review business, it makes tons of sense for, but it's hard for other businesses. All right. I'm going to get you out of here on this one. What is one marketing lesson or piece of advice that you think about almost every single day?
I got 2 of them for you. Customer centricity, and like that whole idea of you needing to listen to customers, understand them, be in their shoes, know what they feel and think. I think earlier in my career, I was like, yeah, I know how to market to these folks. So true. And the more nuanced the space of the business, the more true that is. I sold into HR in my previous role at ChartHop. Pretty nuanced. I really had to spend time understanding that buyer, and I didn't really understand them truthfully until like I was 18 months into that job. Now I sell into a different TAM, a different ICP, and it's subjectively more complex in my opinion, and it's even harder, and it takes even more investment and time. And so you really, really need to build that core understanding for yourself. That's one. The second one, I mentioned at the beginning of the call, like I move really fast, and something that I think about every day, it's actually how I start and end my day, slow down to speed up. Because I need to take 15 minutes at the beginning of the day, 30 minutes at the end of the day, wrap up, close off my email, my Slack. If you come in hot and you just start moving, and right when you're done, you shut your computer, like you never build emotions for yourself to step back and be like, what the hell am I working on? Like, is this impactful, or am I just trying to check off my deliverable? And so taking time, and sometimes in those moments, you actually learn that like, no, I need to go on a walk and think about stuff. My brain isn't clear on what I should be doing here. Great. Slow down and then speed up and then make your list and execute on it and go crazy. Right. And so I think that's been really, really helpful for me as I've grown.
Yeah. It's like that saying, right? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's so true. Exactly it.
Yeah. Sometimes I think like I'm the same way. Default proactive is where I tend to be, and I'd rather learn from doing, but sometimes you need to have those moments of stillness to figure out how to get things moving the right way, because otherwise you're going to start putting yourself in basically operational debt that you're going to have to unwind, which is going to be a huge pain in the ass later on.
Yeah. Like my cadence, 8 to 10 on Mondays, always blocked for me. I review the same set of reports. I update the same deck with my same sentiment, same thoughts, structure my team's thoughts for the week. We have a couple like programs that we've implemented where my team like summarizes their week, what went well, what didn't, what they're planning for. I incorporate that into like a summary, present that to my peers. And so by 11 a.m. on Mondays, read the metrics. I know where the business is at. I have some POV on what we should be working on. But that 3-hour period is critical to set myself or my team or the company up for success.
Quick question about, is your team giving you that information on Friday, or when are they getting that information to you?
By Friday, end of day. And then I'll typically write it up on Sunday or Monday morning.
Very cool. Yeah, I think there's sometimes this argument of like, do it on Friday, do it on Monday. But I think in this case, it makes a lot of sense, right? Get the people reporting to you, get to you by Friday, and that way you can synthesize everything on Monday and disperse it to leadership and then back down to your team.
Yeah, it's called like a 515. One of the great operators that I know, who leads ops here at Parabola, Andrew Udell, had suggested it to me. We did something similar at ChartHop. Just a great way to keep yourself accountable, keep your team accountable. It's a helpful forcing function for everyone. I also had one of my colleagues say to me, or one of my peers, like, man, I really got rid of my Sunday scaries because I knew exactly what I needed to work on because I'd already summarized it. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. That's what slowing down to speed up is all about. So now you feel ready to go into the week, your plan. So I think it's been
awesome. Any final plugs on your end?
Remote Growth Partners is a great company, great org. No, Jason, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate you and taking the time, and it's been a pleasure catching up.
Yeah, man, this has been awesome. I'm excited to share this with people. I think there's a lot of fun lessons in here, and excited to see how you guys finish out Q4 and some of this new position you come up with next year.
100%. Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Awesome. That's the pod.